Got it?
Okay.
All right, today's talk is going to be your brain on screen time. Never given this talk before. I did a little bit of research beforehand just to see what the state of the literature was. You know, we see problems with screen time popping up in research more often now, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the findings and what the recommendations are. So, first up, a little bit about me. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I have a practice in Lansing, Michigan. I went to school in Chicago, the National University of Health Sciences. I own a practice in Lansing, the Center for Integrative Wellness, where I work with everyone, prenatal all the way to geriatric. So part of holistic medicine is really treating a whole person, and everyone can benefit from that. Everyone can benefit from more physical activity. Everyone can benefit from better sleep and better stress management. So I work with everyone. And then I'm on the board of the Third Circle, which is sponsoring this talk tonight. So disclosures: I'm a naturopath. I'm not a neuropsychologist. I talk about how I interpret the research. There's people doing research all over the world. I try to look at the literature, the original studies, and then give you my interpretation of that literature. So I'm always open to discussion because it helps me learn. I learn from my patients all the time, and I look forward to the healthy discourse. So disclaimer, these things have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, basically. So, learning objectives. I always like to bring up what I want you to get from the talk. You can get more than these things, but these are kind of just a bare minimum of what I would like you to take home with you. So 3 things that research says about screen time, 3 things that your brain needs to be happy, and 3 things that help combat having too much screen time. Now, the research is based on mostly kids, so very young. So if you have teenagers, the research doesn't necessarily apply to them, but there's always more stuff coming out. Now, personally, this talk is interesting to me, not just because I see it in the news more, but because I was a psychology major in undergrad, and I always loved reading studies on, social science studies on populations. And sometimes I feel with these technologies coming out, the population are guinea pigs. We don't know the long-term benefits of these different things coming out. And then we're kind of always chasing things later on once we kind of let the cat out of the bag. And as a naturopath, I'm all about prevention. So if you can be ahead of the curve and start making healthy decisions today, then ideally you don't have to look back 20 years from now and say, what were we thinking? So, our brains love information. And this is something that, I picked up in school at an early age. Your brain loves stimulation from its environment. And I have a pretty active imagination, and I kind of think about how much stimulation was our brain getting 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. I mean, the biggest thing you saw was maybe a wagon got loose in downtown, but you didn't get the constant bombardment, loud sounds, music, colors flashing. Watching TV nowadays is, I watch it, I'm just like, seriously? It's like commercial. And then like 5 minutes, commercial, and the commercials, the volume goes up. And then there's always flashy, and it's jumping all over the place. You're like, what is even a commercial for? That at the end it says Levi's. And it's like seriously, that's their commercial for Levi's. You don't tell me about the quality of the product. You don't tell me about whether it's of good value or not. You just get my attention. You get my dopamine levels up, and then you put a name brand in front of my face. So that's what I mean by, to me, all this is experimental. How is all this marketing? How is all these short duration high intensity, advertising and information going to affect our brains in the long run. Because your brain loves it. You're hitting some senses there. Not all of them, it's not hitting taste. That's a whole nother talk with our food and salt, sugar, and fat content. But the technology's bombarding our senses. So early years matter. If you can't see that, early on, the first year of life, your hearing and vision are strongly developed. More so than you're going to get the rest of your life, that first year. And then the second curve, which you can't hardly see, the blue curve is the second curve. The yellow curve is the first curve. The blue curve is your language skill development. And when you look at the literature, that's where they're really focusing, because they're seeing that children are having delays in their language skill development. So those things are that's the first year, 2 years of your life that you get most of that development. The red curve is critical thinking, and that comes later on when they're 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. So the early years really matter, and if you miss that window, it can have repercussions for the rest of your life. So brain needs, this is from the objectives, your brain, very simple, needs oxygen, that's number one. And there's more research coming out now on sleep apnea in children, or children with sleep disorders, and how closely that's tied to behavioral problems. I think there was a study a month or two ago that said 32% of kids with ADHD has some type of sleep disorder. So oxygenation, especially at night while you're sleeping, that might be a problem. Proper nutrients, water, vitamins, minerals, protein, fats, and carbs, things that your brain needs to be healthy. And last but not least, proper stimulation. And that's where, again, I mentioned your 5 senses. Now, when I say proper stimulation, I'm not talking about this type of brain stimulation. When I say stimulation, I mean engaging your environment. So historically, it meant communicating with your parent, your siblings, your friends, and playing. This has a number of benefits. And the first one I put up there is it helps stimulate neurointegration. I had a professor in school, my neurology teacher always said, neurons that fire together, wire together. And that's really is a very telling statement, because your brain is a muscle. They used to say that all the time. I don't know if parents still say that or not, but your brain is a muscle, and you have to work it out, and not just work it out, but have a balanced workout. You don't want it to just walk around with one big bicep and then everything else is like tiny. But the problem with screen time is you're kind of doing that. You're working out just one bicep, and the other parts of your physique aren't being properly stimulated, and therefore the neurons cannot fire or wire together, and you miss out on neurointegration. So I'm not going to read all of these out loud, but I just read a couple. Language skills is important. The communication and playing. Increasing attention spans. How many people wish their kids had a longer attention span? Improves sensory skills. Improves critical thinking. That's more like a board game. Vital, parents need to play board games with their kids. So things like peekaboo are important. Your kid learns to make eye contact. They're reading facial expressions. They actually are learning how to see faces. And your face is three-dimensional. And that's one of those things where if you take away a three-dimensional face and replace it with a two-dimensional screen, you're losing brain stimulation and development. Playing catch. These things all seem so simple, but it takes a lot of processing to see a ball coming in the air at you, process where to put your hand, how to position your body, how to absorb the impact of the ball, and then turning around and throwing the ball back to a person. How much force do you give the ball? What kind of arc do you put on the ball? all that takes a lot of neural processing. That takes a lot of thinking. These are not simple skills, and they're skills, again, that need to be developed. I get parents that tell me my kid's just clumsy. My kid just has poor balance. My kid is just a bad athlete. And I'm like, no, you got to work on those things. That's like telling me that your kid can't do math and you throw the towel in. If they can't do math, you teach them how to do math. If they can't read, you teach them how to read. If they have poor balance, you work on their balance. If they can't catch, you work on their catching skills. You don't just throw the towel in and assume that physical development isn't important for health and longevity. I used to love the monkey bars as a kid. Again, a lot of brain firing going on there. And schools have also gotten away from play. I mean, it's like the parents have gotten away from it. There's technology, and in schools, if math scores are low, well, let's just do more math. And how's that working out? You know, math scores are going down more. Reading scores are low, let's do more reading. Reading scores are dropping lower. And there's research out there. There's a book called Spark by John Ratey, R-A-T-E-Y, and he looked at how physical activity impacted academic outcome. And believe it or not, giving kids more playtime improved test scores. You know, not more reading, not more math, not more science, but more play. So, and then a board game. Again, critical thinking. As the kids become older, you can modify what type of neurostimulation is going on. So this is, all those things have been replaced with this now. You know, you're not working that, throwing the ball or catching the ball. You're not working your muscles or hanging from monkey bars. You're not developing all of the problem-solving skills and interacting with your peers. You know, a lot of this has been replaced with just looking at a two-dimensional screen. So who's ever seen a scan like this before? So this is some new fancy technology, I think developed at MIT. This is a diffusion tensor MRI, and this is showing you actual brain connections. So this is looking at how neurons are wired together within a brain. And I like looking at this technology because as a psychology major, I used to work for mental health, there was like no objective way of looking at brain structure. As a naturopath, historically we've tested neurotransmitters, metabolites inside the urine, which, how much, just because you're peeing out a lot of serotonin doesn't mean that you have enough inside the right part of your brain. So, that's kind of, to me that's guesswork. But now they have this diffusion tensor MRI, and are actually able to look and see if there's enough synapses, enough neural integration going on in parts of the brain. So this is where the researcher in Cincinnati is looking at screen time and how it affects actual brain structure, real time in kids. Not waiting until they die and doing an autopsy, but real time, how do their brains look? So one of them, this is the name of the study up top, association between screen-based media use and brain white matter integrity in preschool age children. And it goes to conclusion, you can read it yourself. There's an association, increased screen time, media use, compared with the AAP is the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines, and lower microstructural integrity of brain white matter. So they found that there's less actual white matter density, which is kind of your cortical higher thinking, in kids as they use more screen time. So, of course, the findings suggest further study is needed. You can't really do these scans on thousands and thousands of people, so a lot of the studies are small. So I like to also put that out there. So these studies are being done with 100 kids. They don't have thousands and thousands of kids yet. But again, this is newer technology, and we're getting there. Next study, brain connectivity in children is increased by the time they spend reading books and decreased by the length of exposure to screen-based media. So again, this is looking at brain connectivity. that diffusion tensor MRI, how our brains being shaped and developed based on screen time. So if you ever get bored and want to read more about it, just Google, screen time, kids' brain development, and you'll see how many things are just coming down or coming out. So this is just another image where they can actually just look at actual connections within the brain and then compare kids with ADHD or different, issues going on to kids that are not diagnosed with anything. And then say, well, this kid has less connections here. Maybe that might be related to their mood disorder.
So was that a normal brain then, or was that?
That's a normal brain.
That was a normal brain, okay.
Yeah. The pictures actually take they can do slices and they can pay attention to certain parts of the brain. So it can actually look at how connections from like the prefrontal cortex back to the thalamus and then to the brainstem. It can actually break it down and look at all those things. So when they do the research, they're looking at specific pathways and how those are connected. So what we know from research-wise is screen time, sedentary lifestyle. Kids don't move as much when they use more screen time. Sleep disturbances. Kids don't sleep as well and sleep as much when they use a lot of screen time. Attention problems, difficulty testing, I put in brackets because it's hard to sit down. I feel for kids because if I was watching, flashy, bright, loud all day long, and you gave me a test to sit down for 3 hours, and it said, choose one, A, B, C, D, how long? I don't know how long I'm gonna make it. I might make it through a page or two. But by the time I got to question 50, or my fatigue would be well set in, and I'd be staring at the clock. So attention problems, and then violent media increases risk for bad behaviors. Again, that's just what the literature says, and so that's all this becomes important for monitoring what your kids are exposed to. So what does WHO say? WHO is the World Health Organization, and again, this will help prompt the talk because based on the research, for the first time they came up with guidelines. Before, they really didn't have guidelines, parents were kind of just winging it, but the director from WHO said achieving health for all means doing what is best for health right from the beginning of people's lives. So under the age of 1, no screen time, no iPhone, no television. They recommend nothing. They recommend, I know, strict, right? They recommend that the kids don't get exposed to anything. Age 1 to 5, no more than 1 hour a day. And they recommend, if they do an hour, they recommend that that's done like, FaceTiming grandma, like still having a level of social interaction. But wait, there's more. WHO also recommends children ages 1 to 5 do 180 minutes of physical activity each day. And I always love WHO because they're not as politicized as like a lot of the American boards are. But in defense of the American board, the American Academy of Pediatrics went stricter, and they said 0 screen time before the age of 2. That's how important language skill development is. That's how important hearing and learning how to see is. And they think that there's some level of jeopardizing that development if you expose kids to screens before the age of 2, unless video chatting. And to be more specific, I think at the age of 18 months they were okay with like grandma, aunts and uncles video chatting with the kids. So this is how that looks in a pretty informed mind. 18 months or younger, this is the, again, American Academy of Pediatrics, no screen time, Zippo. They say 18 months to 2 years, so 18 months to 24 months, that they can do screen time or high quality educational programming. So if you want them to watch Mr. Rogers or what's that, the count guy, 1, 2, 3, ha ha ha. You can watch that guy, but don't just watch mindless, television. And then 2 to 5, no more than 1 hour a day. And then 5 and older, they actually gave a recommendation as I'm getting older here.
Section.
Yeah.
Doesn't say a number though.
It doesn't say a number, but I still have some recommendations for older kids coming up here.
Just limits.
Should I skip that one? All right, sedentary lifestyle. So you have decreased physical fitness. It affects your immune system. Kids struggle with mood regulation where they have a more sedentary lifestyle. There's poor blood sugar regulation, which can do a number on your brain because your brain likes a nice steady food supply. And then poor cardiovascular function. So sedentary lifestyle, it leads to a number of other problems that can develop. Sleep disturbances. And this, I kind of put down things to look out for. So sudden, unexplained decrease in daytime performance for kids like dragging. Is there an issue with sleep disturbance? Watching them sleep. Kids can have sleep apnea. People think of sleep apnea as something for older overweight people, but children can have sleep apnea. Difficulty falling asleep, problems with sleeping through the night, staying awake, difficulty staying awake during the day, and snoring. I just went to a talk actually last week on airway problems in pediatric populations, and yeah, there's a number because just sleeping with your mouth open alone can cause poor sleep quality. So kids that have allergies and difficulty breathing through their nose while in bed, that by itself can give you suboptimal sleep quality. So what can we do? What can you do? So some ground rules. I kind of divided it into ground rules that I think everybody can probably implement to some degree, and then suggestions. So designated charging area. You can't have your phone and charge it at the same time. You can use it with teenagers, you can use it with any age group. Have a designated charging area. When they need to charge it, they charge it and they go do something else. And then they take it off the charging from the charging area to use it. Not in their room, charging area in the library, in the kitchen somewhere, a designated charging area. Review all games with their kids. Look for interactive options like a Nintendo Wii. Use parental controls to block inappropriate websites with older kids. They have to do screen time in front of you. Again, they can't go to their room, they can't close their door, they can't go downstairs. All screen time is kind of in designated areas. And then while they have screen time in designated areas, you can also do like screen-free zones where no screen time in the car. I know that people have long car trips. They like the kids to be quiet in the back. But that's one of those places where, hey, we can talk for 3 hours while we drive up north or somewhere. When watching programs with the kids, you can hold a discussion with them. Again, that's trying to help develop some of those other muscles. It takes a lot of, if you think about it, it takes a lot of brain power to look at someone, talk to them, and have Janice say, my name is Janice. And for me to recall that, make eye contact, read body language. There's a lot that goes on when you're communicating with other people. And again, you lose that. And you don't develop that muscle at a young age. And now you have kids that can't make eye contact. You have kids that attention is zero. You tell them your name and then 3 seconds later, it's like gone. Those things I think used to be developed better historically. It's hard to quantify because it's not like we have studies and from the 70s. But I think that a kid needs to learn these things, and you don't necessarily learn them from a screen. I put down use a blue light filter. That's to help be less stimulating and less damaging to the eye, the retina. And then 3 hours of physical activity. I mean, I know that sounds like a lot, but if they get in a little bit before school, and then you count gym time at school and playtime at school, and then extracurricular activities, I used to honestly get in 3 hours a day, thinking back. I used to go to school early and play basketball, and then I had gym time, and then I had, after lunch, we had playtime, and then I was a 3-sport athlete, so whatever was in season, whether it was soccer or football or basketball, I was doing that. And my mom was notorious for kicking me out the house. I was like, that's her thing to do, days of our lives, or as the world turns, out the house.
Yep.
And then some additional options, no background TV. And my mom's bad for that. The TV stays on at all times. She keeps it on, she gets up in the morning, turn it on, and it's on for 15 hours. So no background TV. If you're gonna have the TV on, it's intentional. It's for a program that the family can sit down and watch together. No devices until school, so they don't need to own any devices. Again, that's tricky, because I know grandmas and people will buy them stuff, but no devices until they start, school age. So that's nothing before the age of 5. A tech-free zone, so bedrooms, dinner table, car, for an example, areas in their lives where there's no technology. Enforced screen time limits. There's apps that do that. It just depends on your household and how much fighting you want to do, but there are apps that you can put on devices that, it clocks how much they use it, and then, down. Set a good example, limit your own screen time. So you don't want to tell your kids no TV, and then you're down watching TV, or your kids are just sitting there like, seriously? Like, I want to be an adult. And then have unplugged time, and that could be a day, it could be a time of the day, it could be a weekend. So you could have, no devices after 8 o'clock, or no devices on Saturday, or no devices on Sunday. Just some ways to start limiting. So here's just an example of, you can still turn technology into a family event where, the kids are playing a video game, and, you're talking with them while you're playing the game, you're still having some level of communication and interaction. So again, the American Academy of Pediatrics, physical activity, 3 hours a day. That's the recommendation, from ages 1 to 5. And then screen time, they're recommending none up to the age of 2, unless again it's FaceTiming or some type of educational material. And then 1 hour from ages, this one just says 3 to 4. And then they actually put in sleep recommendations. So they want kids 3 and 4 years old to get over 10 hours a night. So that's a lot of sleep. And I don't know if kids are getting that much sleep, especially if you have devices or looking at TV. That can be very stimulating to the brain, and that's where the blue light filter comes into play. So review, I asked you to know 3 things that research says about screen time. Just off the top of my head, disturbed sleep, kids are more sedentary, and they have shortened attention spans. That's 3 things. 3 things that your brain needs to be happy: oxygen, food, and stimulation. And then know 3 ways to combat having too much screen time. And like I said, I listed a few ways. Have a designated charging zone where the kids are not allowed to use their device. Keep them in front of you. Don't let them go to their room or in the basement or anywhere to use the device. And have no tech times. 8 p.m. everybody puts their technology away, and we're gonna have a board game, or we're gonna read for this last hour of the day. So, it's not something that you have to necessarily implement all at once, but you can start working on adding these things in if you don't already have some of them in place. And like I said, for me, the most important and the most vulnerable population is that 0 to 2-year-old population, where so many of your language skills, your vision, your ability to see and track things, and hearing, the ability to orient yourself to someone calling your name, all those things are developed for the age of 2. That's the most vulnerable population. So that's the end. Again, I'm in Lansing. Yeah, usually I talk about diet and exercise and all those things, but a lot of what I do also is lifestyle modification. And there are some things in your life that lifestyle-wise aid in your health and your decline. If you ever read about the blue zones and where people are the longest lived in the world, the researchers look, and number one is always social. People think about eating healthy and they think about exercising, but number one is always social engagement. Don't go home and be a widow or have an empty nest and then just wait for the grave. If you have a full schedule, you're going to church on Sundays, you're going to choir practice on Wednesdays, you go to bingo on Thursdays, you go bowling on Fridays, you have a reason to live, and those people live longer versus people who just go home and eat healthy and exercise. That's not enough. So I'm all, there's an importance to community, there's an importance to social engagement, and science-wise, I don't know if they know exactly the mechanism, but to me, I just think everyone needs to have a purpose. So, any questions?